Hey, what's going on, guys? I want to make this video talking about different types of alcohol. And the purpose of this video for me, it's kind of an introduction into it. This is something I'm still learning about myself. I'm by no means a professional at this. I'm not a bartender. I haven't gone to school for this. This is just an average person who is interested in the knowledge that comes behind alcohol and its history, its roots, where it comes from, what it's about, what it's made of, and the differences between the millions of different kinds of alcohol. I find it plays a big part in I would say a lot of different countries, but certainly it's something you cannot, stay away from. And what I mean by that is that you see alcohol everywhere. You see alcohol advertisements on TV. You see bars when you drive down the road. Every single person who's watching this video knows someone who drinks. Could be casually, could be they drink heavily. Maybe they don't really drink that much, but they have had alcohol before. So, I mean, it's part of all of our lives, whether you want to admit it or not. You've seen it, you've heard about it, maybe you've had some, maybe you haven't. But I find it's been really interesting, and I've definitely learned a lot of things in researching alcohol in the last couple months. Some things that the reason I'm doing this video really is just to kind of educate anyone who doesn't know anything about it, because there are a lot of assumptions, at least that I've made about alcohol, that were in fact not true. And I did find that interesting, so I figured I'd pass it on to you guys. And there's probably a lot of you out there who do drink, maybe even on a regular basis, that don't even know, what's going on with what you're putting in your body. So I thought it'd be interesting to kind of share what I've learned thus far. Now, most of what you see here, about 75% of it, is different types of whiskey. That's mostly in the back, okay? The front line here are just some various popular different types. They kind of represent different types of alcohol. Now, in my opinion, maybe not the official, way to describe it, but I think there's basically three different kinds of alcohol. All right, defined by me as beer, all kinds of beer, light, dark, from all around the world. Beer's beer, right, to me. Then you have wine. Wine's wine. Again, could be made anywhere around the world, could be any color, any year old, whatever, aged differently, it doesn't matter, wine is still wine. And then the third category, I would say, is spirits. Now, spirits to me represent anything that's not beer or wine. Basically, what most people would consider hard alcohol, or booze. So there's tons and tons of different types of spirits. Spirit is just a very loose term for basically a higher concentrated alcoholic beverage, okay? You have vodka, which, by the way, I know nothing about and I have no interest in at all. I don't. I don't know what it is. I just have no interest whatsoever in vodka, and I'm not going to be talking about it today. You have different types of rums. And by the way, what makes different types of alcohols are what it's made of, okay? Besides vodkas and rums, you have different types of liqueurs, okay? One representative of that is this Frangelico, which I'll talk about briefly. You have just basically flavored liquor in general, like Southern Comfort, which I'll talk about because that's very popular as well. Then you have brandy, different types of whiskey, lots of different things. Schnapps is a specific type of, liqueur, I would say. Here's a popular one, Goldschlager, obviously known for its little gold flakes that float around. It is real gold. And by the way, I've found out on an average size, this is one of the smaller size bottles. This one is a 375 milliliter, but I believe the regular standard, like 750 milliliter bottle, has 1/10 of a gram of gold in it. Okay, just to give you an idea, it's about $6 or $7 worth of gold. For anyone who is interested in that random fact, which you probably did not know. So anyway, it is real 24 karat gold. It's just gold leaf, so it's very thin pieces, but it's kind of the novelty factor, and it's cool, and you can digest it and all that, and it's fun. But then you have your flavored, a lot of alcohol is flavored, and I think it's to cover up the harshness of the alcohol itself. And a lot of people are interested in consuming alcohol to, I don't know, there's various reasons why you'd want to. Maybe in a celebratory manner, like I said before in previous videos, you want to just party, you want to have a good time, relax, whatever. But you don't like the taste of the alcohol, so it's covered. And there's plenty of alcohols out there that try to infuse a lot of different familiar flavors, particularly like with whiskey, there's a lot of flavored whiskeys out there as well. And in the background here, I have just two common examples. Here's Red Stag, which is basically Jim Beam, a Kentucky whiskey that they infuse with black cherry flavoring. Okay, so the black cherry overpowers kind of the natural flavors, so that it's easier to, say, mix with Coca-Cola or some other kind of drink to make a cocktail. And a lot of the flavored liquors out there are used more prevalent in cocktails. People don't generally drink it straight, just in a glass by itself. But there's still plenty of people out there who do appreciate the natural flavors you get from alcohol, and they don't really want any interference with, different kinds of essential oils or additives to try to make it taste better. They think it tastes pretty good as it is. It's just natural how our, ancestors drank it, or great-great-grandparents and stuff like that. So anyway, let's talk a little bit about alcohol volume, okay? When you talk about alcohol, a lot of people like to talk about its proof, all right? And by the way, this video is pretty generic, not really generic, but it's very general information about alcohol. And a lot of people watching this would know a lot of this information, but there are people who are watching who don't know any of it. That's why I'm doing this, that's the purpose of it. So a proof of an alcohol is basically twice its percentage by volume. Meaning if you have something that is 100 proof, it means the liquid in the bottle is 50% alcohol, pure alcohol. All right, there's no such thing as 200 proof, because you can't have something that's pure alcohol. It's just impossible. Now, when you see like, genuine moonshine, it could be like 195 proof. It could be very close, but it's extremely, extremely dangerous to consume alcohol that's that high, in alcohol. Which sounds stupid, but yeah, you can't have alcohol that's almost that pure, because it's just gonna screw up your body. And you could get alcohol poisoning, and there's a slew of different things that can happen to you, and it's pretty bad. But what I think is interesting is that there's a lot of misconception as to what is quote-unquote stronger alcohol than what people might believe, okay? One example I'll explain briefly, which I learned, is that I think a lot of people out there think that, that whiskey in general is just a very strong, good to get you drunk booze. They figure, oh, well, I can have something else, and maybe I'll have some rum. It's not as strong as whiskey. But there's very, a vast difference between different kinds of whiskeys. There's tons of different whiskeys. Now, I'm not going to get into too much detail on whiskey in this video, but certain types of whiskey, by law, need to be a certain percentage of alcohol. Most bottlings of whiskey is 40% or more. Okay, that's what you will find when you buy a regular whiskey, is 40% or 80 proof or above. Okay, now most commercial branded blended whiskeys, which are probably the most common sold in the world. In fact, the most commonly sold whiskey in the world, which I have found out from many sources, is this one right in my hand. Okay, this is a blended Scotch whiskey, Johnny Walker Black Label. The most the world's most sold Scotch whiskey. All right, now Scotch whiskey is a specific type of whiskey, but it's a very consistent product. It's something that, bottle after bottle, it's going to taste very similar. Whereas some of the other, let's say, single malt scotches could differ slightly between batches and years and so forth, like this Glenmorangie, which is completely different. Even though they're both Scotch, this is a single malt Scotch, meaning it came from one, distillery. Whereas the Johnny Walker Black Label may have, as many as 30 different types of single malts in it. All right, so I mean, the whiskey information it's really, it's overwhelming how much difference. A lot of people would think, well, you ask them what's whiskey, they'll say, well, it's this nasty brown stuff that's really strong, and it'll get you drunk and it tastes like crap. But there's thousands of different kinds of whiskeys, and there's a lot of information to learn, and way too much for this video. This is just a general information video. But what I found interesting is the different percentages of alcohol, okay? Now, as I mentioned, well, let's take a look at the Johnny Walker Black again. All right, very common Scotch. A lot of people like Scotch, right? This is bottled at 40% alcohol or 80 proof, right? 40% alcohol. Let's put that down for a second and compare it to some other types of liquor. All right, the Goldschlager we were talking about before. This is a cinnamon flavored schnapps. Goldschlager is bottled at 43.5% alcohol, okay? So that's more powerful you know, in alcohol than Scotch. Most people wouldn't realize that. But look at this right here, Tanqueray, which is a gin. You know, a lot of people would mix this with tonic water, you know, gin and tonic. This is bottled at 47.3% alcohol. You know, far more powerful than the Johnny Walker. So that might be surprising to some people. Now, Southern Comfort. Okay, this is one I learned quite a bit about, because I always was under the impression that Southern Comfort was whiskey with some different flavorings in it. And it turns out regular old, you know, the white and red label SoCo is not whiskey whatsoever. In fact, there is no real whiskey in this. Okay, it's just whiskey flavored alcohol. And now this one's bottled at 70 proof or 35% alcohol. So already it's 5% less than the average, you know, bottle of whiskey. But it has tons and tons of different flavors in it. You know, all kinds of spices. It's fruity. It's really unique. You know, and a lot of people still enjoy it. But there's other kinds of Southern Comfort, some flavored ones. The SoCo Pepper, which does actually have some real whiskey in it. Now this one is bottled at 35% alcohol. Okay, just like its cousin, I guess you'd call it, or brother. But this does have real whiskey in it, genuine whiskey, as well as some Tabasco sauce. Okay, so that was kind of a no-brainer for me, right? At least to try. Not particularly fond of it, but, you know, it's unique. If I had to pick between them, I still like that one more. But, yeah, there's real whiskey in this. There's no whiskey in this whatsoever. They make a SoCo 100, which I believe is called that because it's 100 proof, and that also has real whiskey in it. But the regular standard stuff you get, you know, it's just whiskey flavorings. Then we, you know, have rum. Completely different. Captain Morgan this one is bottled at 35%. So you're looking at the same exact alcohol, you know, volume as Southern Comfort. But you may say, you know, the average person might think, well, you know, if you're drinking Southern Comfort all night and your girlfriend's drinking Goldschlager, then, you know, you're going to get wasted and she's going to be fine. Well, I mean, it couldn't be further from the truth. This is far more powerful in its alcohol content than either one of those. You know, and these are all very popular drinks, at least from what I understand. Then you have your Liqueurs, Frangelico, which is very sweet. It's almost like a hazelnut syrup, and it doesn't even taste like alcohol. But it is made out of alcohol. Okay, it is an alcoholic liqueur. This one is bottled at, let's see, 48 proof. All right, so it's 24% alcohol. It's still far more alcohol than, say, a glass of wine, you know. It's an equivalent amount in wine or even beer. But it tastes like candy, so you can very easily overdo it, you know, and you could be drunk before you know it. So there's tons of different alcohols. Another one, cognac in general, but Hennessy is obviously pretty popular. Cognac, besides Hennessy, the other most popular one, which I know only from watching The Ladies' Man on SNL back in the day, is Cavassier, okay, in all of its variants. But cognac, come to find out, now I always thought cognac was a type of whiskey, which it's not. Cognac is a brandy. No different than this. This is a flavored brandy. Okay, this one is bottled at 35% or 70 proof. Very common, you know, blackberry brandy, right? But cognac is brandy from the specific region of Cognac in France. That's why it's named that. And you can't call it cognac unless it comes from cognac. Now, even though these are both brandies, that's 70 proof, and this Hennessy is bottled at 40% alcohol, so it's 80 proof. So I just find all this stuff really interesting. Another very popular liqueur, and it's just called a Italian liqueur, but it's like an almond kind of flavor, is Disaronno. And you'll see the commercials all the time for, you know, Disaronno on the rocks and stuff like that. And, you know, for years and years, I just thought it was whiskey. I didn't know. It was just brown alcohol. You know, I didn't know any difference. This one is bottled at 28% alcohol. Okay, 28%, which is only 56 proof. So it is very low in alcohol. Right? You pour a glass of this compared to pouring, you know, a glass of, let's say, I don't know, Maker's Mark. Kentucky Straight Bourbon, and this one is bottled at 45% alcohol or 90 proof. All right, huge difference. Very big difference in alcohol content. So that's just some general information on some liquor and stuff that I've learned. And like I said, it was kind of surprising to me. I mean, a lot of you guys may be watching this and going, yeah, I knew all that. You know, this is for people who don't know it, obviously. It's like even the knife videos, you may be watching a knife review and go, yeah, come on, Jeff, I know that. Well, the video is not for you then. It's for someone who doesn't know that. Let's talk about whiskey. Now, I'm just going to briefly get into it because there is a slew of information and I really don't want to make a 3-hour video in one shot. I'll break it up into simpler parts so it's easier to enjoy and you can pick from what you want to hear about and what you don't. That's for future videos. But just to give you a general idea, let's move across the table a little bit here. There are tons and tons and tons of different types of whiskey. The first thing you can kind of differentiate between them is where they're made. You have American whiskeys, and these are the most common ones, by the way. American whiskeys, Scottish whiskeys, which obviously are Scotch, or Scotch whiskey is only made in Scotland. Then you have Irish whiskey. You have Canadian whiskey. And then you have Japanese whiskey. Now, Japanese whiskey, I don't own any to represent in this video, but it is still very popular. And of course, there's many other countries that do produce whiskey, but these are some of the top ones. Now, obviously, Scotch is going to be, one of the most common ones you're going to find. Besides the American whiskeys like the Tennessee, Tennessee whiskeys and the Kentucky bourbons, and then of course you have very popular Canadian whiskey such as Crown Royal, represented in the back here. Very popular Canadian whiskey. There's other ones out there that I just do not own, so I have no way to represent them in this video. But you also have like Canadian Club. I'm trying to think off the top of my head some other ones. What else we got? There's a bunch out there. I just can't think of them right now. And then of course, I mean, I would say the average person, if you say whiskey and they know nothing about alcohol, there's going to be one of two brands that comes to their mind. And they're probably not going to think Scotch. They're going to think Tennessee whiskey, or they're going to think Kentucky bourbon. Now, the biggest Tennessee whiskey, or the most known Tennessee whiskey, is right here. Okay, and not only this brand, Jack Daniels, which is so popular and so well known, but this particular type of Jack Daniels, which is Old No. 7 or Black Label. All right, by far the most common known whiskey, probably on the planet, to be honest. It's just everyone knows what it is. You don't have to drink, you don't have to like drinking, you don't have to know anything about alcohol, but you do know that Jack Daniels is whiskey. Right? You've seen commercials your whole life, you've heard about it your whole life, you've seen it in movies and television, entertainment. It's just a well-known whiskey. Okay? A very distinctive process to make Jack Daniels Old No. 7. The other one, which is just as popular, I would think, would be Jim Beam, which is not a Tennessee whiskey at all. In fact, this is a bourbon. And there's distinct rules as to what makes a bourbon a bourbon. Okay, it has to do with, the mash that you use. I believe like 51% corn or something. There's a minimum of corn that needs to be used in your mash to make it a bourbon. All right, both of these are bottled at 40% alcohol or 80 proof. So again, you may think, put this back for a second. The guy with the bottle of Jack Daniels has very, very strong alcohol on him, right? And the girl in the corner sipping on her little gin and tonic. That's nothing, ladies drink, right? But this is far more powerful than Jack Daniels. Just a common, I think, misconception. I mean, at least in my mind. I didn't really know about any of this stuff until I started researching it more. So yeah, there's just a slew of different types of whiskeys as well. Now, of course, if I go back and talk about rum, there's hundreds of different types of rum. If I go back and talk about liqueur, there's millions of different flavors of different, liqueur. Any kind of flavor you can think of. Any fruit, there's a liqueur. There's like root beer liqueur. There's, a very popular, which I don't have something representing here, but Jägermeister. Jägermeister is something you've probably heard of. That's a licorice liqueur. And it's just very popular. But pretty much any flavor you can think of, they make a liqueur out of it. And that is, of course, used in multiple different cocktails to try to make it taste better. I think that the concept for a lot of cocktails is to try to make a drink that tastes good and to make you not think or not realize you're drinking alcohol. It's to make it more palatable. A lot of people don't like the burn of alcohol, they don't like the flavor of alcohol in its natural state, so they feel like they have to mask it by adding in fruits and juices and different flavors to cover it up. All right, I think that's the biggest goal when you're making a cocktail. Some people might argue with me. They might say that you're just complimenting the alcohol, but the average person just looking to have a good time isn't trying to taste the alcohol. They're trying to down it as fast as they can, and that's the whole idea behind a shot glass, you know, is to throw that stuff down your neck as fast as you can so you don't taste it. You know, you don't put expensive, fine tasting, you know, aged alcohol in a shot glass because it's something you want to sip and savor. You don't want to throw it down. That's what the cheap stuff's for. Everything serves a purpose. It's just like a cheap knife. You know, the $5 knife may be frowned upon by a lot of people, but it certainly serves a purpose. You know, you don't want to use that $150 knife every time you need to do something, because sometimes you don't want to scratch it, you don't want to get it dirty. So they all serve a purpose. Good alcohol, cheap alcohol, everything in between, flavored and non-flavored. It would, if it didn't serve a purpose, they would no longer be sold, put it that way. But then you have more, I would say, perhaps traditional whiskeys. Okay. Now, I don't think, as far as my research shows, that there hasn't been a distinct difference between who, or what country I should say, first kind of invented whiskey. Was it the Irish or was it the Scottish? Okay. Was there Scotch or was there Irish whiskey first? And it's been proven that, like, back by the 1500s, that both the Scots and the Irish, in their trading, both had whiskey in their possession. So I don't think there's a distinctive who came up with it first. So that's something that's probably debated back and forth between, you know, people who live in those countries, you know, as they have their local pride, I'm sure. But anyway, I have two single malt scotches to represent, you know, Scottish whiskey. And they're in the back here. I showed the first one before, which is very good. Single malt, Glenmorangie. And again, this whiskey here, okay, now the biggest thing, let me kind of back up just a little here, and I don't want to confuse you because it's a lot of information, but this one here is a single malt Scotch, okay, meaning it's basically just from one, you know, distilled spirit in one specific distillery in Scotland, right? Now, this bottle here, Ardbeg, is the exact same thing, okay? Only this one comes from Islay, which is very well known for their heavily peated whiskeys. Now, peat, I could do a whole separate video on, but there's other people on YouTube who know far more than this than I do, and they're better at explaining it. And I'll put some links in the description box for people who I think, all the, you know, liquor channels that I watch, because I think they're fascinating and very knowledgeable. But these two are both single malt scotches, but they couldn't possibly taste any different from each other. You might think, well, you know, maybe Scotch is all the same. No, not even close. Well, what about single malts? They must all be the same. Nope, wrong again. These things, you know, the comparison, I would have to say it's the difference between, say, eating a piece of pizza over here and having a cheeseburger over here. They're that different. They're nothing alike, completely separate. Even though it's the same idea, they're totally different. This one, the Ardbeg, is so peated, and the easiest way I can explain it to you is just smoky, dirt flavored. You know, peat is basically, think of like peat moss, you know, and they use that to smoke the, you know, the grains that they're using to make the whiskey, and it's extremely, extremely smoky, and it's something that either you love or hate. There is definitely no gray area in peat. People love it, and they're peataholics, or they just cannot stand it and it makes them sick. It's a very, very powerful scent and taste. I'm not particularly fond of it, to be honest, but, you know, I wanted to try it anyway. Now, the Glenmorangie is more of a subtle flavor, and it's not very heavily peated at all. So even though these are both single malt Scotch whiskeys, they taste completely different from each other. Completely, not even close. All right, now these two here are both Irish whiskeys. Bushmills, very popular, and Tullamore Dew, well known, but I don't think as popular. And I can tell you, Tullamore Dew so far has been the harshest, least flavorful, least enjoyable whiskey I've tasted thus far in my whole little whiskey venture. I just really like this the least out of everything I've ever tried so far. So right off the bat, I wouldn't recommend it. But hey, maybe it's your thing. We all have different taste buds, different, you know, wants and likes and stuff. So I may say it's crap, and you may say, well, you're wrong. I love it. And that's good for you because it's not very expensive at all. It's pretty cheap. But you know, and let's go back for a second to talking about American whiskeys, the bourbons here. All right, now Jim Beam, like I said, Kentucky straight bourbon, very, very popular, right? Some people may not like the flavor of Jim Beam that much, so they might lean towards, say, the Red Stag, which is literally the same Jim Beam, but, you know, black cherry flavored. And this would be far more popular for mixed drinks. Like I said before, maybe, you know, Red Stag and Coca-Cola, it would taste like a cherry Coke with kind of an alcohol thing going on with it, you know, so it's preferred. Now, here's Jeremiah Weed, which is a different brand. Let me see if I can find out on the back here who distills this. Well, it says from Jeremiah Weed Distilling Company, so maybe they're their own company. That's one thing I haven't got a hang of, is what distilleries own what, because Jim Beam owns a whole slew of different types of liquor and so forth. So even though they're different names completely, you think they're different companies, and sometimes they're not. They're just like, you know, it's like Sam's Club soda is basically Walmart brand soda, and Coca-Cola owns Sprite and stuff like that, you know. But anyway, these are both cherry flavored bourbons. But Jeremiah Weed is bottled at 45%. Okay, so it's 90 proof. Whereas the Red Stag, even though it's very similar in its nature, is not as strong. Okay, this is bottled at 40% alcohol, or 80 proof. All right. There's really a slew of information here. And I'm sorry, it's already a long video, but a couple other things I want to point out is even like, the Canadian whiskey, okay, like Crown Royal. There's also flavored Canadian whiskey. And this I found tastes exactly like Fireball's, the candy. And it's called Fireball. It's actually a very nice presentation here. Also a Canadian whiskey, but it's cinnamon flavored. Now this is bottled at 33% alcohol, or 66 proof. So it doesn't have as much punch because of all the flavoring and stuff in it. But I find that it's extremely palatable and does not taste much. Because of the cinnamon has that natural burning sensation to begin with, it doesn't taste much like alcohol at all. Okay, so someone who's not particularly into alcohol flavorings or stuff like that, and maybe something like more for mixed drinks or to even drink straight. And then we get down to the non-aged spirits, okay, like this one, and which I'll show. This actually is one of my late gifts. I haven't shown this in a video yet, at least depending on how I post these in what order. But this is Straight Shine, and this comes from Canada as well. And this is pretty cool. This is just a non-aged, basically it's like legal moonshine, it's just not as powerful. This is 100 proof, so it's 50% alcohol by volume. But it's clear. It's a clear spirit. This is made from a molasses mash, as opposed to whiskey. Most whiskeys are made from like a corn mash per se, or grains. This is from a sugar-based mash, which is molasses in this case. It has a very unique flavor and aftertaste, but it's clear because it's not aged. Whereas a lot of the stuff here, it's kind of a brownie color because whiskeys are aged. Not the liquors in the front. A lot of liquors in the front are probably, you know, there's colorings and dyes and stuff. By the way, some of the whiskeys in the back here, even the Johnny Walker, use caramel, which is just a coloring. Okay, so they look like a dark, rich, well-aged whiskey. And that's to be consistent. All right, that's just so that their product always looks the same. But most of these whiskeys and liquors, they pick up their color from being aged in different, you know, wood casks. And, you know, season after season, the liquor's pushed in from the heat and the cold, you know, contracting and opening up, and it's pushed into the wood, which is usually charred, you know, and they you know, char the inside of the barrels, and they get all toasted and like ashy looking, but it caramelizes the sugar that naturally, you know, is in the wood, and the liquor kind of pushes into that and pulls out and pushes in year after year, you know, season after season, and it darkens the color of the liquor, and that's where it gets its color from. But that's another thing to be known, is that particularly with whiskey, just because it's dark doesn't mean it's old. Just because it's light doesn't mean it doesn't have any flavor. Color, really, you'll find that means very, very little, because there's so many different whiskeys out there that contradict what you're supposed to think. You're supposed to think, you know, if it's dark, it's old, and it tastes great, and it's so much better than something that's really pale or light looking. But because the process can be different in so many places, that can be completely false. You know, so you don't really go by the color. Although the color does tell you certain things. So anyway, I think I'll stop there. I think the video is long enough. My camera doesn't have a timer on it. I wish it did so I could keep track, but it does not. And I'm fairly certain this is an extremely long video as it is. So look, this is kind of like a test run. This is me talking about alcohol. And as you can see, I mean, I find it interesting. But is this interesting to watch? You know, please be honest. Do you find it fascinating? Tell me one thing. Did you learn something? Watching this video, did you learn anything about alcohol? Because if you did, you may not still be interested in it all. But that's the purpose I want to serve. I want to teach you guys stuff as I learn it. Now, I don't want you to think that, you know, I'm superior in knowing this stuff, because I'm just learning myself. You know, I'm not an expert in it, like I said before. But I find it fascinating, and I don't mind sharing information, because it dispels different beliefs and different rumors and, you know, urban legends, I guess you can call them in some cases. So it's always fascinating to learn about stuff. Even if it's not something you're ever going to do, you may never drink at all, but you still may find it fascinating to learn about stuff like this. Who knows, maybe with your friend and he's, you know, sipping on Jack Daniels or something, and you can throw a fact out there to him. You know, kind of surprise them, and they go, what? That's pretty cool, I didn't know that. You know, maybe your parents drink, and you can throw a fact out to them and say, hey Dad, you know this? Or hey Mom, do you know that? You know, or maybe you're much older, your kids drink. You say, did you know this? Oh no, I didn't. That's fascinating. Because I can guarantee there's tons of people out there who drink, and probably drink a lot, and just don't know much about what they're putting in their body. So I think it's fascinating to find out, and particularly how it's made and the process of it and the history behind it. It's really interesting. So anyway, I'm going to just call it quits for this video, because there's way too much information already. I hope it wasn't confusing. I hope I didn't stumble and repeat myself much, but you know, it's just fascinating to me. So that's all. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. Let me know what you think, and like I said, if you learned something, you know, let me know in the comments. And hey, if I screwed up and said something that's false information or wrong, if I got something wrong, please let me know. I'm always open to being corrected and bettering myself. And that's pretty much it. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I thank you for watching. If you do happen to drink, doesn't matter how frequently, let me know what you like. I'm always open to suggestions and trying new things. That's it, guys. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.